Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. As you can tell, I still have a cold. Uh, Welcome back to Old Man Rambles. Um, I have some thoughts on a subject. I hear a lot about um, the liberal media. Now, liberal media bias. The media is hostile towards conservatives, that type of thing. Now, I'm not going to go into whether or not the liberal media lies or about its accuracy. I have the media bias chart behind me just as a reference field. I don't want to get into that right now. My thoughts are no one ever seems to bother to try and think about why the various types of media might skew more towards the left, towards the liberal side, not just the news. So, I mean, journalism, writing, television, film, music, and comedy does tend to skew to the left. No one really seems to examine why that is. There's the only notion I get from the right is that it's indoctrination, which is crap. But there never seems to be any real analysis of why those various types of media skew left. I'm going to try to armchair general that a little bit myself, armchair analysis, and go over a few points that I've noticed in my lifetime. The first I'm going to talk about is why the left and media, specifically Hollywood, seems to be anti-right, anti-conservative. That takes a bit of history. Now, history being the McCarthy era. For those of you who don't know, Senator McCarthy was heavily anti-communist. He was also someone who loved to throw his power around and abuse that power. He basically liked to wield it against people who disagreed with him. And basically anyone who spoke out against him was labeled a communist traitor. And he basically sought to root out communists anywhere he could. He targeted Hollywood. Fun fact, Ronald Reagan, former President Ronald Reagan, was at the time the head of the Screen Actors Guild, and he spied for McCarthy to report on any suspicious activities of his fellow actors to Senator McCarthy and the FBI. A fun little fact about Ronald Reagan that he ratted on his fellow actors to the government. But that's another story. And McCarthy ruined lives. He really did. He really hated Hollywood and fought tooth and nail to ruin people's lives and to put people in jail, to get other actors to rat out other actors, to point out potential communists or suspected communists to the government. So, yeah, Hollywood has a history of antagonism with the conservative right since then. They have a reason for being anti-conservative, even if they don't know why they're doing it. The history is there. That is, in my opinion, the historical origin of Hollywood's leftists being against or biased against the conservative right. That doesn't mean it necessarily should persist today, but I think the origins of it have some merit. But that's just an opinion. The next thing I want to talk about is the leftist bias in the media, which isn't quite as heavy as people criticize it being. If you look at the chart, well, if you're one of those people, you're gonna dismiss the chart, but I think it holds ground pretty well. A lot of the major news organizations are fairly unbiased. You've got a few. The most prominent ones are MSNBC and CNN. But aside from that, the major news outlets, the major news networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, Reuters, AP, Associated Press, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, they're all fairly unbiased. It's just that people read into it. If they're criticizing a conservative, that there's a good chance the conservative deserved it, and they also fairly regularly criticize the left as well. The major news networks, as far as I can see, are fairly unbiased. The perception that they lean to the left, though, is very different. But they are dominated by the left. But that's not how it used to be. Early on, the news, both print and television and radio, were dominated by conservatives. And that went on for a very, very long time. Pretty much right up until the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and Nixon's administration. The reason for that being is that the conservatives among the news, who ran the news, were of the opinion that you didn't question the government. If the government told you something happened, you reported what they told you. You didn't dig into it. The conservatives in the news felt that they needed to trust the government. They could not go around assuming the government was lying to them. However, younger, more liberal journalists realized that the government was lying to the American people. They're the ones who broke the stories of the government lying about the Vietnam War, the Korean War, and the Nixon administration, the lies the Nixon administration told the people. That was all broken by left-leaning investigative journalism. And because of that, the news media slowly, progressively began to become more dominated by the liberal left. So again, the news media being biased against conservatives is more of a perception, but it is more these days run by the left, and journalism does tend to be more of a left-leaning career choice. The third and final thing I'd like to talk about why various types of media is more heavily dominated by the left is a bit more of a cultural thing. If you were to take two identical families, they both grew up in the same neighborhood, mother and father are the same economically, have the same jobs. Each of those has a single child. One of those households is conservative, one of those households is liberal. And if both of those children go to their parents and say, I want to study acting, what is the conservative parent going to tell their child about wanting to go out and study acting? Conservatives are more likely to be practical in that regard, in that, honestly, as far as acting goes, it is the profession with the highest amount of unemployment. Most people who are actors are unemployed. They spend a vast majority of their time not doing acting. They're doing other jobs, keep a roof over their head, and acting when they can. Same thing goes, if you want, Dad, I want to be a journalist, or I want to be a musician, I want to be a comedian, I want to be an artist, I want to be a sculptor, a painter. A conservative parent is not going to say, gee, that's great, son, follow your dream. A conservative parent, I'm not talking about any bias against the left or anything, is going to be more practical. They're going to say, son, daughter, whatever, that's a passion project, that's a hobby. You need to do something to feed yourself and keep a roof over your head. Get a practical job. Flipping burger, you're going to be flipping burgers anyway if you want to be an actor. Do something productive with your life. A liberal parent is more likely to say, that's awesome, go follow your dream. These are generalities, because obviously there are conservatives in the media. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a conservative. Clint Eastwood's a conservative. Tim Allen is a conservative. These people do exist. But they are more likely to be practical. And the media is not a practical way of making a living. It is very difficult to do. Even my own daughter, when she said she wanted to study music, I said, that's awesome, dear. You can study music, but be aware that it's not a profession you can make a lot of money in. Do it because you love it, but please make sure you can support yourself. Don't expect to graduate and look at me, I'm pretty liberal. Well, don't consider myself liberal, I consider myself a left-leaning centrist. But if you view my content, I do skew to the left. And even I told my daughter to be practical. I'm glad she studied music. I'm glad she's a music teacher. She found something she could do to follow her passion. But even so, due to that little cultural skew between conservative and liberal, you are going to have more liberal people pursue media style careers, whereas conservatives are going to follow more practical careers. And, you know, that's just my armchair analysis of why, the media is dominated by the left, without discussing any potential bias in those fields. Good hunting.